Have you ever sat alone and quietly asked yourself, when did things change between me and my children? You spent decades raising them, changing diapers, staying up all night, being there through heartbreaks and victories. You gave up weekends, holidays, and sometimes even your own ambitions so they could chase theirs, and now they cut you off mid-sentence. Your advice gets brushed aside. When you need a hand, they're suddenly unavailable. Worst of all, you feel like you've faded into the background. If that sounds familiar, you're not alone. Many parents reach a point where the dynamic begins to shift. You used to be the protector, the guide, the one they turn to for everything. Now it feels like they barely see you. Sometimes they act like you're in the way, or even a burden, and that kind of heartbreak, it hits deeper than most people realize. The instinct is to react, remind them of your sacrifices, raise your voice, maybe even pull away. But here's a truth that might surprise you. Forcing respect rarely works. What truly creates change is something deeper, something quiet, strong, and far more enduring. That's what we're diving into today. Simple yet profound changes you can make right now that will shift how your children perceive and treat you. Not with guilt or shouting matches, but with quiet strength, healthy boundaries, and deep self-respect. These aren't tactics. They're real, lasting changes that can bring back your dignity and connection. Let's begin with one that might sound familiar: trying too hard to please. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no? Gone out of your way just to keep the peace, even if it left you feeling small. Maybe you rearranged your entire schedule to babysit when you were exhausted, or tolerated a disrespectful tone just to avoid conflict. So many parents do this without even realizing it, but here's the truth. The more you seek their approval, the less they respect you, not because they're bad people, but because human nature respects strength more than surrender. I once met a woman named Margaret. She had poured everything into raising her 3 kids, but as she got older, she began to shrink back, letting them make decisions about her home, her health, even her finances. "I just want peace," she said, but the more she yielded, the less they listened. She believed she was being kind. What they saw was someone whose voice didn't carry weight anymore. See, real respect doesn't come from giving everything, it comes from honoring yourself. When you always put yourself last, you teach others to do the same, and they will. So if this hits close to home, hear this clearly. It's time to stop bending over backward. It's okay to say no. It's okay to set limits. You're allowed to speak up, you're allowed to take up space, and you don't need permission to do it. Respect starts inside, with how you treat yourself. The more you protect your own time and energy, the more others will follow your lead. It's not about being cold or harsh, it's about showing your children that your presence has value, that you matter. Now, let's look at another reaction that often backfires: arguing. When someone disrespects us, our first instinct is often to fight back. To say, "How dare you talk to me like that?" Or, "Do you remember everything I've done for you?" And while the emotions behind that response are valid, it rarely changes anything. In fact, it usually makes things worse. Here's something that truly shifts the dynamic. Stop reacting, start leading. When you answer disrespect with anger, it shows they still have power over your peace. But when you respond with calm and certainty, it says something entirely different. I don't need to shout. I know who I am. Take Frank, a retired teacher I once knew. In the classroom, he commanded respect for decades, but at home, his grown children barely listened. They interrupted, dismissed him, even joked about his ideas. At first, Frank used to push back. Every chat became a debate. Every disagreement ended in raised voices, but nothing got better. Then something shifted. Frank made a quiet decision. He stopped fighting. He still shared his opinions, but with calm, not combat. He let go of trying to earn their respect and began embodying it. He walked with quiet assurance, like a man who had nothing to prove, and something remarkable happened. His kids started to notice. They began to truly listen, not because he shouted louder, but because he stopped playing the old role. You see, respect isn't something you demand, it's something you live. Let your presence speak. Let your calm carry your strength. You don't have to convince your children of your worth. They'll feel it in the way you carry yourself. And there's one more truth. may be hard to hear but deeply freeing. You don't need your children to fill your emotional cup. That doesn't mean you don't love them. You always will. But the more you rely on their attention to feel valued, the more the balance slips away. Even with those closest to us, emotional independence earns respect. When your peace doesn't hinge on how often they call, how sweet they are, or what they do, you begin to shine in a different light. You become someone with a full and rich life of your own. I remember Helen, a kind soul who had poured her heart into raising her children. But when they moved out, she was lost. She waited by the phone. She called daily. She kept saying how much she missed them, and slowly they pulled back. She couldn't understand. She was giving love, so why didn't it come back? One day, something inside her shifted. She started focusing on herself again, joined a dance class, went to lunch with friends. She read, painted, laughed, and then the phone began to ring again. Her kids wanted to hear about her life. They missed her, not just the motherly attention. Why? Because she stopped chasing connection and started radiating it. So if you feel that ache when they don't call, or that quiet sorrow when they don't visit, remind yourself, your value doesn't depend on their attention. It lives in you, and when you nurture that light inside, others are naturally drawn to it. With more care, more consistency, and more respect. When you begin to emotionally step back, not in anger, but in quiet strength, everything starts to shift. They no longer see you as someone waiting on their approval, but as someone rooted, worthy, whole. That change is subtle, but it's powerful, and with time, it becomes undeniable. But there's one more key to rebuilding respect: boundaries. Strong, kind, and clear boundaries, not walls, not distance, just healthy limits that teach others how to treat you. And here's something many people don't realize. Most adult children don't ignore boundaries to be cruel. Often it's because those boundaries were never clearly established. If they interrupt you, make big decisions without asking, or speak in ways that make you feel small, it's usually not out of malice. It's because those behaviors were never gently corrected. Why? Maybe out of love, maybe to avoid conflict. But here's the truth. Love without boundaries often turns into quiet resentment and silence. Over time, it starts to feel like permission. Take Robert, a retired businessman who once commanded respect in every boardroom. But at home, his grown kids cut him off, dismissed his input, and treated him like he had nothing left to offer. At first, he let it go. Not worth the fight, he told himself. They're just stressed. But each time he stayed silent, the disrespect grew, until one dinner, one of his sons snapped at him over a simple story. That night, Robert didn't yell, he didn't guilt-trip anyone, he just waited. And when the room grew quiet, he looked his son in the eye and said, calmly but with conviction, "You don't have to agree with me, but I do expect to be treated with respect. And if that's not possible, I'll step away from conversations like this." The room fell silent, not from anger, but from realization. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't guilted anyone. He simply drew a line with quiet strength, and that moment changed things. His kids understood. This wasn't a threat, it was a standard. A respectful tone was now the entry point for a conversation, not optional. And over time, they adapted, not because he forced them, but because he required it. That's what boundaries do. They're not about power plays, they're about clarity. And when you become clear, others adjust, even your own children. They begin to realize your presence is not just available on demand, it's a gift, one that deserves care, attention, and respect. Now, there's one more habit that often gets overlooked, and this one runs deep for many parents, the habit of giving endlessly, even when it's unreciprocated. You know what I mean. You give your time, your energy, your help, sometimes even your money. Not out of obligation, but out of love, and yet, when it's taken for granted, when the thank yous stop coming, when the calls only come with needs attached, it stings. It's not wrong to give. That instinct is part of who you are. But if you continue giving without boundaries, without appreciation, something unintended happens. You don't teach them to love you more, you teach them to expect more, and little by little, your generosity becomes invisible. Take George, for example, a father of 3 who always showed up. Need help moving, George was there. Short on cash, he'd open his wallet. Babysitting, no problem. He'd skip his appointments to be available. But when he had a minor surgery and needed someone to stay with him, not one of his children offered. They were too busy. That moment shattered something. George didn't yell, he didn't complain, he simply stepped back. He decided, no more automatic yes. He'd still help, but only when it truly mattered, and only when it was appreciated. So the next time they asked, they heard things like, I'd love to, but I've got something planned. Or sure, as long as you take care of X, Y, and Z. At first, his kids were confused, even a little annoyed, but then they began to notice. They started saying thank you, they asked more thoughtfully. Why? Because his help was no longer assumed, it was respected. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is not be available at every call. Let them feel your absence, not out of spite, but so they can appreciate your presence. That's not being unkind, that's teaching value. And while we're talking about value, here's a truth that may feel both strange and freeing. You are more than a parent. You are a full human being, with dreams, time, and a story of your own. You may have spent decades saying, once the kids are settled, then I'll take care of myself. Well, the time has come, the kids are grown, so now the question is, what fills your spirit? What makes you feel alive? Because here's what happens when you start living your life again. Your children notice. They admire you, not out of obligation, but out of genuine respect. They see you not as someone waiting in the wings, but as someone shining on their own stage, and that shift is beautiful. It inspires them. It reminds them that aging isn't about fading, it's about evolving. Whether it's trying something new, reconnecting with passions, or simply enjoying your day at your pace, you are allowed to put yourself first. And when you do, they stop seeing you as just mom or dad. They begin to see you as a whole person, with wisdom, energy, and a story still unfolding. And when you carry yourself with that kind of quiet power, when you set those boundaries, speak your truth, and let go of the old need to please, you'll notice something profound. The tension begins to ease. The weight on your chest lightens. You're no longer walking on eggshells or hoping for scraps of appreciation. You're standing tall again, not because your children changed overnight, but because you did. And that's the heart of it. Respect isn't something we squeeze out of others. It's something we quietly inspire by the way we carry ourselves, the way we speak, the way we live. When you start living with more self-respect, everything else begins to align. Let's return to something simple but often forgotten. You matter, not for what you give, not for how much you've done, but simply because you are, and your family and this world need the version of you who feels confident, calm, and clear. The version who doesn't shrink to keep the peace, but who stands in truth with love. That version of you changes everything, and you might be surprised at what happens. Your children might start calling more often. They might speak more gently. They might ask for your opinion and actually listen. These aren't coincidences. They're reflections of you reclaiming your space in the relationship, not through guilt or demands, but through presence, self-worth, and quiet strength. And even if they don't respond right away, please don't lose heart. Sometimes people need time to adjust. They've grown used to the version of you who always said yes, who stayed silent, who gave endlessly without asking for anything in return. And when you shift that dynamic, it might feel uncomfortable for them and for you. But that discomfort is part of growth, and it is so worth it. Here's a truth worth holding close. Love and respect are not the same. You can love your children deeply and still set limits. You can care with all your heart and still say, I won't be spoken to that way. That's not harsh, that's healthy. That's what mature, loving relationships are built on. And more often than not, this shift doesn't damage the bond, it strengthens it. Because when your children see you value yourself, It invites them to value you too. When they witness you living a full life pursuing hobbies, making new connections, speaking with quiet confidence, they begin to admire you again, not because they have to, but because they want to. So here's a question I invite you to gently ask yourself today. Where am I still giving my power away? Is it when you always say yes, even when your heart says no? Is it when you stay silent, when your voice deserves to be heard? Is it when you wait for their approval to feel good about yourself? Wherever that is, start there. Make one small change. Maybe it's saying, I have other plans today, but I'd love to see you another time. Maybe it's saying, I deserve to be spoken to respectfully, or this conversation can wait. Maybe it's booking that long postponed trip, joining a new group, or picking up that old hobby again. Small steps, that's all it takes. And don't think you have to be perfect. You don't. You just have to begin. Start honoring your time, your voice, your worth, because that is where true respect is born. If this message speaks to you, if you've ever felt that quiet ache of being overlooked or the sting of being undervalued by your own children, I want you to hear this. You deserve better. Not because of all you've done in the past, but because of who you are right now. And if you're still here, thank you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your courage to reflect, to grow, to step into your strength. That alone means you're already on the path, back to the dignity, respect, and peace you've always deserved. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have you experienced moments when your children didn't treat you with the respect you hoped for? Have you tried stepping back emotionally or setting boundaries? What helped you the most? Share your story in the comments, even if it's just a few words. Your wisdom might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if you found this message helpful or healing in any way, please give it a thumbs up. It helps others find this kind of content. And don't forget to subscribe and tap that little bell so you'll know when we post more videos to support you, uplift you, and walk with you in this journey. You are never too old to reclaim your voice, never too late to rebuild respect, and never too far from the love and peace you truly deserve. Thank you for spending this time with me. You are worthy, you are strong, and you are not alone. Until next time, take care, and remember, living with dignity is the most powerful message you'll ever send.